Before we continue with the analysis, I want to talk to you guys about jerseyfifa.com, the home of all of the greatest football kits. Whether that's the latest home shirts, the latest away shirts, tracksuits, or even retro kits, Jersey FIFA has a bit of everything. There really is something for everyone, so if you are interested, then make sure to use the link in the description down below and head to jerseyfifa.com. Hey guys, welcome back to the AJ Analysis channel, where today, match coverage of, and I know, sit down because this is a shock, a Manchester United win and a Manchester United clean sheet. 2-0 win over Wolverhampton Wanderers at Old Trafford yesterday afternoon. A pretty convincing performance. I wouldn't say it was perfect, but for large periods of the game, United were very, very much in control. Wolves didn't manage a shot on target in the game. United had about 9 shots on target, I believe it was. Something like 27 shots in total. Really a good performance from Manchester United. Like I said, it's still not perfect, it's still not textbook, but I don't think we're expecting that. But what it was, in my opinion, was for large periods quite controlled. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about kind of what the two managers done, what was good from Ten Hag and maybe bad from the Wolves manager, and also some certain players, and what we saw in terms of patterns for some of the goals. So, let's get into it. And it all started, of course, as it always does, with Manchester United at the back. This is a big talking point this season. It always is. And this is, of course, again, is where things started. And I'll be honest, Wolves came with a bit more, at times, of an aggressive press than I was expecting. So we were expecting the front two to match up, that was kind of obvious. And we were also expecting the wingers to go to the fullbacks. Again, it's obvious. But what we saw more than I was expecting was the midfielders pushing high, and then one of the centre-backs picking up Bruno Fernandes, and the other picking up Anthony Martial. Now the reason that Wolves felt that they could do this was because Rashford wasn't in the side. When Rashford plays, teams can't leave one centre-back at the back, whereas Martial doesn't have that extra bit of pace, so at times it did allow Wolves to squeeze a little bit higher. And, as a result, there were spells during the game when United struggled to play the ball out from the back. Particularly with David De Gea, I've got the stats written down here, let me see. 11 out of 25 passes, 2 out of 16 long passes. It's not great. See, the problem with this particular lineup is if De Gea is going to go long, even if it's accurate, Sancho's not going to win it, Antony's unlikely to, and Bruno Fernandes and Martial, they'll win a couple, but they're not exactly target men. And this is the problem. And then also, United don't have the players which are particularly good at getting on the second ball. So, there were spells during the game where United did have a bit of trouble in these areas. However, fortunately for United, the Wolves' press was disconnected. So there were times when it looked like how we've got on screen here, and it was very effective. And when it was like this, they did press well and cause United problems. However, there seemed to be situations during the game where they weren't as confident doing this. There were situations where Kilman didn't want to come out and be quite as aggressive. And that has a knock-on effect on the rest of the defence and the whole team, because now the midfielders have a slightly different job. And when you have that hesitance in your team, against a team with quality players like Manchester United have, it's going to lead to problems, and it did hurt Wolves. They had this indecisiveness in their press in the first half. And it's the problem, for me, with playing a 4-4-2. If you play a 4-4-2, you need to go press high and play a high defensive line, or you need to play kind of a low block, sit right back and get behind the ball. Wolves, at times, it felt like they were doing a bit of both. It felt that the defence was quite deep, but the attack was quite high, without necessarily putting too much pressure on the ball. And what that is, of course, going to do is open up a massive hole in the midfield. And that's what we could see. So let's say the Wolves' defence is a little bit deeper like this. We've then got the Wolves forwards are reasonably high. They're not exactly putting pressure on the ball, but they're in a high starting position like this. And now what we can see is that Wolves have a midfield 2 up against the midfield 3 of Manchester United. And that's obviously a problem. So the Wolves midfield, they don't know who they're meant to be picking up. You know, let's say Varane's got the ball in this situation. Costa and Cunha aren't putting a ton of pressure on the ball. If I'm Neves and Lamina, am I meant to go super high and super aggressive on Christian Eriksen and Casemiro, but run the risk of leaving Bruno Fernandes in behind the midfield? Or do we sit a little bit deeper like this? Sit on Bruno Fernandes, but then United can get easy control with Eriksen and Casemiro in these deeper areas? Or do you do a slightly staggered approach? But then again, one of your midfielders is getting outnumbered. This was the problem that Wolves had throughout the first half. Because United have quality in these areas, and with Bruno Fernandes back in the centre of the pitch where he really needs to be, it gave United a completely different threat, because they were able to move the ball in these areas quickly, but also accurately as well, which was very important. And then what they do, when you're creating this overload in the midfield, and the Wolves' defence is sitting off a little bit, it allows United to make these transitioning situations. And there were so many occasions in this game where United were on the transition, and they looked so dangerous. The problem was just end product. Sancho on the left-hand side, just ineffective really, he just didn't do enough in this game for me. And then Antony on the right-hand side, he does get an assist for a goal, which we'll look at in a second. but his decision making was actually really, really poor in this game. He probably should have had 3 more goal contributions in this game. There's a header he should score, and in 2 other situations, he's in a really good position, but doesn't execute the final ball, or shoots when he should pass, whatever it was. It was a problem in terms of his end product does need to improve. However, in terms of just focusing on this game, it was a constant threat which United carried, and it was all because of this kind of inconsistency in the press in the Wolves midfield. They didn't know where they were meant to be, because tactically they were outnumbered by Ten Hag's midfielders, and like I said, this led to the first goal. And we can look at this first goal quickly using Once Video Analyzer Pro, a really, really good video analysis software. If you guys want to check it out, it will be linked in the description down below. But what we can see here is Casemiro and Eriksen, the double pivot for Manchester United. And we can see the 2 Wolves midfielders on this occasion have been a bit more aggressive and decided to put them under pressure. However, they're a bit slow in getting there. They're pressing, but it's not quite intense or aggressive enough, and it gives Eriksen time to pick the pass. But what we can see that this means, with the Wolves defence being quite deep, is that there is now this huge channel of space where Bruno Fernandes is standing all by himself. And you've also got Sancho moving inside as well. So if we watch as this plays out, the ball goes into Jadon Sancho in this area here. Look at Bruno Fernandes. He's got so much time on the ball, or so much time to receive the ball, I should say, and he is going to receive the ball in this area. Now, the Wolves defender is about to kind of try and react and get out to him and put pressure on him, but again, it's just a little bit too little too late almost to get out and pressure him. So Bruno Fernandes kind of does well here, wins the tackle. Sancho does well, goes to Bruno Fernandes, and now Wolves have a problem. And this is the situation which we saw time and time again. We've got a 3 versus 2 here, we saw a 4 versus 2 at one point, we saw a 5 versus 3. Like I said, in general, in the game, Antony's decision making wasn't very good. But this particular move, it was spot on. Bruno Fernandes plays the pass well, as he always does. Antony takes his time. We can see that the Wolves defender kind of gets sucked in going towards his goal. So Martial just steps back. The art of standing still in the box at times, we saw it here. The ball comes across to him, and he puts it into the back of the net with a good finish. United really deserved this lead, and it was that same pattern which we saw all half, all game really. It's just this was the one time which United really executed it well and got it spot on basically. Now, as we'd expect in a game like this at Old Trafford, there were also spells where United had more controlled possession, and this was because of their ability to again create overloads in important areas. So we saw Wolves, of course, in the first half with a front 2, which meant that United often built with a back 3. Now, the personnel in the back 3 changed a lot. We saw Casemiro dropping a bit more than what we typically do, but the idea is that you're going to create this sort of shape, something which looks a little bit like this. Push Wan-Bissaka forward, so you've got your back 3 here, which is going to outnumber the front 2 and allow them to step forward. You've then got Christian Eriksen here, you've got a front 6 or a 5 and then a 1. And it's just overloads in really important areas of the pitch. Like I said, there was a lot of rotation. Sometimes Luke Shaw was deeper, Casemiro was a bit further forward, perhaps something a little bit like this. There were plenty of rotations. Now, I thought this was a good thing to see. This is something which United should try and do more. It's a shape which I recommended in my tactical preview, and during periods of the game it worked. The one problem I felt was the dynamic down the left-hand side didn't quite work for me. I thought Antony and Wan-Bissaka on the right-hand side had a good understanding of when one of them is meant to be wide and when one of them is meant to be a bit narrower in the channel. On the left-hand side, I don't think that the understanding and the dynamic was quite as good. There were times where we would see Sancho come inside into this area, but at the wrong times, the wrong timing of movement, and it leaves United with no width on the left-hand side. Now, when that happens, Wolves know that they can tuck in and defend more narrow, more central, more compact, and it makes life a little bit more difficult for Manchester United. So, this isn't anything major, because of course United won the game 2-0, but it's just something moving forward. United need to make sure that they get the timing of movement right down the left-hand side to make sure that there is width being provided. Apart from that, United were in complete control in the first half, like I said, because of all of these overloads which they were able to create. Now, Lopetegui is of course a good manager. Apologies for the pronunciation if I've got it wrong, I'm not too sure how to say his name, but he is a good manager. And he isn't just happy to let his team kind of get overloaded in these areas, so he did make a change, and at half time we saw Hwang Hee-chan come on for the pretty anonymous Neto. And Wolves moved to more of a 4-3-3. And this is what, for me in the second half, kind of gave them a foothold in the game, and for 20-25 minutes, it looked like they might get back into it and cause some problems. And the main reason for this is because they now have matched up with United in all areas of the pitch. So it's now pretty much a man-for-man battle all over the place, rather than United constantly having the spare man in these positions. So for example, in the midfield, Wolves can now go man-for-man. So there is no longer this free Manchester United midfielder, and if this had been the case for the first goal doesn't happen because Wolves would have had it sorted. So this was a good change. The problem was that his side they just didn't perform that well, Wolves. I thought I was a bit disappointed by their performance. They didn't really bring much to the table, and also there was a slight problem with their tactical tweak, and it came from the intelligence of the Manchester United centre-backs. So let's put Wolves back in their 4-3-3. So now Wolves are only pressing with one forward. In the first half, it was a front two like this, which means that you can go man for man for the centre-backs. However, in the second half, it was just the one forward. Now, that's not necessarily too much of a problem against your typical teams that aren't managed well. Because what you can do quite easily is, the ball goes one way from the goalkeeper, Costa forces over one way like this, and then you go man for man and trap a team one side of the pitch. That's what you can do against most teams. However, Manchester United have a little pattern which doesn't always allow you to do that, and it works a little bit like this. Raphael Varane will get the ball in this position here, go wide to Wan-Bissaka. Now, typically what happens in this sort of structure for any other team is Varane will hold this position, which means Costa can go tight to him here, Casemiro is kind of marked here, and Cunha's going to go to Wan-Bissaka. However, United do something a little bit different, and Varane steps forward into this position, dragging Costa with him. Now, this is something that I was speaking about during the week, something which United need to use a little bit more, because it now opens up the pass across to Victor Lindelof. And United done this really well to kind of negate the change that Wolves had made, because now Lindelof can step forward with the ball. And the problem from a Wolves perspective is that now you've got a player stepping towards your midfield, it asks new questions of your midfielders. Neves in this position, does he just let Lindelof carry the ball forward, or does he step out and try and press him? If he steps out and tries to press him, you can then play around him. And then again, you get into dangerous positions and create those transitions. So again, I thought it was a good little adaptation, which we saw. Lopetegui tried to make a good change and nullify United, but United had the response. Something else which United done well, in my opinion, and it's just the last thing we'll touch on, was the substitutions. Now, substitutes have been a big theme of United's season, and for most of the season, Ten Hag's got them spot on. In recent weeks, not so much so, they've been a bit less effective. However, in this game, I thought the subs done really well. Weghorst, I think we know what to expect from him. It's not going to be technically perfect, and he does still do things which are frustrating. However, I thought that he brought a really good energy to the side in the second half. He was winning more of his duels than what we've seen in recent weeks, and he seems to be a bit more like his old self, which we were seeing in February. Kind of putting that hard work in, pressing players, getting about the pitch, so maybe he just needed the rest of the past few weeks. I also thought Fred came on and done a really good job. His energy, his intensity, but also his game management was actually really good. And then, of course, Alejandro Garnacho, the star boy. What a player. What a player Alejandro Garnacho is. He's been out for the best part of 6 weeks now. It might even be longer. And he comes back, instantly hits the ground running with another important goal on the counter-attack. It's not the most special goal you'll ever see, but the composure is really very good to kind of unsettle the defender and goalkeeper before finishing. And it was a really important goal. And his role, it could be big over the next couple of weeks to try and get United over the line in the race for the top four. But apart from that, I think that's everything I have to say for today's video. It was a big day yesterday for United. You had Newcastle dropping points with a 2-2 draw to Leeds at the same time as Manchester United go beat Wolverhampton Wanderers 2-0. Another clean sheet. United are now guaranteed the Golden Glove for this season for David De Gea. No keeper can catch him now. So that's kind of a good defensive record for the club to have. It's a good thing. Apart from that, yeah, I think it was all round a pretty good day. Avoided injuries and things like that. So that's all I've got to say for today's video. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you have enjoyed it. And as always, I will see you in the next one.